Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Shift, an online educational program consisting of 7 master teachers, whereby within this first tier, we're going to help you process this moment in time. I want to welcome you and introduce you to my good friend and colleague, Joe Gandarillas. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, so good to be here. Thanks
Really,
for having me.
really good to see you, Joe, and always a pleasure to connect with you and have the opportunity to
Wonderful.
speak with you. Joe, let's just kick off. Can you describe a little bit for our audience what this time has been like for you and what you've been going through and how you've been facing this quarantine and this isolation?
Yeah, sure. I think Billy, like we all know, the world that we knew is completely different right now.
Yeah.
And I think if any of us ever thought about, that we would ever be in the middle of a pandemic, being kind of, in what we call, lockdown and, with very strict social distancing rules, I don't think any of us in our lifetime most of us in our lifetime would ever think that was even possible. It was never something that even crossed my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you.
No, I mean, how could you prepare for something like this or even
Yeah,
see
I
it
mean,
coming?
and I think, I found it to be really interesting, right? Because in the beginning, ironically, we were traveling. We traveled to Europe in the beginning of January, you know, um, and we got back from Europe. And this is when there was word about some virus over in China, but it was never a concern about like, oh, that was going to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
But it was starting to be a little bit of a buzzword. And we got back from our trip, and uh, we had a really really crazy time trying to get back. Our flight was canceled, and we had to go to we were in Paris. And we had to go to London, and it took us 24 hours to get home. Well, the second night we're home, um, my husband, I wake up in the middle of the night, and he was on fire.
Hmm.
Now, in 33 years together, this man's gone to the doctor maybe 5 or 6 times in his whole life that I've been with him. And I woke him up. And I was like, "Hey, something's going on." I was like, "Let's take your temperature."
Yeah.
He had 103.5 fever, and I'm googling like, "What do you do? Like at what temperature do you take somebody to the emergency room?" And 2 days later, he still could hardly walk.
Hmm.
And I took him to a doctor, and I'm sitting in the waiting room because he couldn't even drive. And I start feeling not well myself. I start feeling super hot, and I go to the receptionist. Maybe the doctor could see me. Anyway, they said we had influenza A. To this day, we're not fully sure because it was now coming over at that point. Because it
Sure.
was in Paris at that point, but nobody really knew.
Hmm.
So we started pretty early, like kind of like, and I remember saying to the doctor, "We just got off a plane. We were over in Europe. Like, I want you to know that, like, because I wanted them to be aware, like, I don't know what this is." And, you know, I had never seen him so sick.
Hmm.
And so anyway, fast forward, now this, now the buzz is happening. Now they're doing somewhat minor things. And in the process of this, my husband, who designed a line of fabric trim and designed this showroom in New York City, there's an opening party.
Hmm.
Now, at this point, they were saying, everybody, wash your hands a lot and use hand sanitizer, but nobody was saying don't go into New York City.
Hmm.
So we went into this, event, and that was like a Tuesday or a Wednesday. No, it was a Wednesday night. 2 days later, we locked down.
Hmm.
A week later, one of the people at the event, was one of my husband's best friends, comes down with the virus.
Hmm.
My whole staff was at this event. So now we're all we're all very nervous because he's in the hospital in a coma at this point.
Hmm.
So it started from a very fearful place for us. Unfortunately, our friend died.
Hmm.
And so you know, so you ask what this moment in time has been. It was really rough for us for me in the beginning. Um, yeah. It was a really rough time. Within 2 weeks from there, two of my employees came down with the virus. And that was, 20% of, almost 20% of my staff. And now we're on quarantine. Now we're another 2 weeks of quarantine because, now we're, they're God, thank God they both are fine. And, but I would say, Billy, the first 30 days of that time, we talked, we've talked about this before. It's, I had to pull every practice that I had in my life to try to keep myself from not being on the hamster wheel. Because I was on the hamster wheel for a little bit. I was tracking about 25,000 steps a day in the house. I just kept myself so busy. And then I finally realized that from the work that I do and what I teach people, right? I couldn't keep waking up every day thinking that same thought, right? The same worry, because the fears, it's one thing I talk about a lot is fear is a low level energy. And I know how to raise my vibration. I know how to go higher than it. And so I needed to slow down, and I needed to actually do a little surrendering and just count my blessings, because I was like, I'm okay. My family's okay. My friends, my husband, we're all okay. And we'll be okay. And it's been, I would say I would rank this as one of the most challenging times in my life. But it's also been a time where I am so grateful for the tools that I have in my toolbox, because if I didn't have those and I didn't have the great support that I have, I think it would be harder.
Yeah. Joe, I really appreciate your honesty, and one of the things I hear you talking about is moving from a place of fear really to a place of love. And in our world of yoga and counseling and coaching, that's a pretty known thing. You're coming from a place of love, or you're coming from a place of fear, and that can kind of capture a lot of things. How do we get our audience and to recognize that they're coming from a place of fear, but then two, how do we get them to move from a place of fear to a place of love?
I think, it's such a great question, Billy, because a lot of people will say, well, you have to have an insight, right? I say, yeah. Well, an insight never really changes behavior, right? Because I had an insight. Yeah, the world was scary. People were around me were sick and we lost somebody, but you have to sometimes come to the edge, right? You have to come to that edge, and then you have to find out how to move through it. And I remember, Billy, I sat right here. I remember one day and I was like, Joe, like, okay, yeah, you've got the insight of what's happening. Like, you're fully aware. Like, I was fully conscious about it. But how do I actually move through it? And to me, I had the first thing I would tell everybody out there is you have to learn to settle the body down. Like, I had to settle down, because when I tell you, Billy, I've got this little ring called the Aura Ring. All of this thing, it tracks your steps, it tracks everything. I didn't even realize how much I was moving in my house. So I would have been on the phone with a client, having a coaching session, and I was just walking like up and down, 3 flights of steps, and walking from one room to the other. Like, I was moving constantly. I was tracking on average 25,000 steps a day.
Wow.
In the house.
Wow.
And I thought, well, that's a lack of consciousness, right? Because I was like, I had to slow down, and I had to slow my body down, because when I got my body to slow down, I got my mind to slow down a little bit. And I'm really, and I started practicing short moments of like, let me just focus on breathing. And like, one of my favorite things, you take your hands, you put them on your lobe, right under your rib cage, on your belly, and you just fill your belly with breathing. The front of your belly, the back of your belly. And I just would learn to slow my breath down. And I've got some really, really great, tools that I use. Like, there's a tool called Heart Math. I love heart math, and it's a little monitor you put on your ear, and it really checks your heart rate variability. And I was like, you've got all the great tools in the world, like, and just so I started using those things. But again, I had to come to the edge, and it's not the first time I've had to come to the edge in my life to make a shift, right? Because sometimes people, it's again, I'm not the guy that's all airy fairy and like you know you know kumbaya and that's just going to change the world. No, I'm an action guy. And I think there's insight, right? There's insight, and then it's like, okay, well, what am I going to do with that insight? So now, if the mind's going too fast, how do I get it to slow down? And some of the things that we can do, right, are just like, I think sometimes actually moving the body is a good thing, because some people will sit, and their form of dealing with anxiety, stress, or fear is to sit and not move. But usually, like when we're in these stressful situations, we've got to try things that could work for for each one of us
Yes.
individually.
Mm-hmm.
There's not one way.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's one thing that I can tell the audience, I mean, there's one way: raise your frequency. Connect. Like, how do you raise your frequency? You connect to something greater. How do you connect to something greater? You count your blessings. And it's you just be thankful, right? We're here. We're together.
Yeah.
I have food on my table. I have a roof over my head.
Mm-hmm.
I have health insurance. I have whatever it is you want to be grateful for.
Yeah. Joe, we've been in this area like of gratitude, and for somebody outside of our circle of wellness, I might respond like, gratitude sounds like such a simple thing, like, or, even when you were just doing the breathing thing, I found myself doing it and just feeling like, like just so much more in tune and connected. How do we get people to understand that these tools that might seem like they're elementary and simple to breathe or to look for the gratitude, how do we get people to really understand that these tools work? These simple ideas and measurements and heart math, there are so many ways in which to better your life and to create more peace, freedom, and love. How do we connect people to these tools?
I think it's a great question. And the question I would ask the audience is, can you tell me if you like how you really feel in this moment? So in that moment, you go, I don't like how I'm feeling. I don't like this feeling of being afraid, and listen, pandemic put aside, right? We all have fears, right? We all have things, like other stresses in life that come up. And say, we know what it feels like. And so you say, well, do I like being in this feeling? Because most people don't like, being stressed, anxious, afraid. They don't like being angry or bitter. It doesn't feel good in the body. So connect to the feeling first and go, okay, well, if I don't want to feel like this, what do I want to feel like? Oh, well, I want to feel happy. Oh, well, great. Well, what does happy feel like? And then you've got to remember what it would feel like to not feel not good, not well. And then you go, okay, how do you connect them to these tools, right? I would say, right, there's therapists, there's life coaches, there's yoga teachers, there's meditation teachers. There are countless books out there, podcasts. I mean, there's this podcast right here. So you right, bam, you just start connecting people to resources, because you want to be as and when you get confused, I would say, Google it. Anxiety tool, or how do I get over my fears? Like, there's a world of information out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because somebody had to teach, somebody told me about heart math one time. I mean, I've got a drawer full of tools that I use, right? And there are now in this information age, there's no reason that all the information's at our fingertips.
Yes. Yeah. And there's so much information about this inner journey that you're speaking about. Joe, I want to go back to something you said, in terms of preparing for this moment in time. Like, how would we had ever known that we'd be quarantined and isolated? And before I even ask the question, I just want to acknowledge the people that are struggling with illness, and certainly those people who have dealt with loss due to the virus. Our prayers and our condolences are with them.
So much, Billy.
Yeah,
Every day, when I pray, just like you said, it's like I pray for all those people, people who have, you know, lost several people, you know, two family members, three family. I mean, it's heartbreaking.
it
And
is.
so that's right. Our prayers are with all these people, and may they find peace.
Most definitely, most definitely. Beyond the illness and the sickness, I was walking in the woods with a friend the other day, and he was like, I need this to be over, this whole thing. Like, I need to get back out there. And he was just riffing and riffing and riffing. And I stopped, and we just stopped in the woods. And I said, dude, think about this. Think about being 85 years old. We're in our 40s. 40 years from now, we look back on this time. Don't you think in some way, shape, or form, we're going to look back on this time and look at this world pause as a gift, as an opportunity that maybe some of us awakened to, that we had a moment to create a shift in our inner journey so that we could see things a little bit differently, and then maybe kind of enter back into the known world with some grace and some wisdom that maybe we didn't have before this. I think simply just about, I saw my mom the other day in my brother's front yard for Mother's Day. And, we're all like kind of a social distance apart. But the love that, it was like string theory, right? Like, it was just like, I could feel like the strings connecting us all, and the gratitude and the love. And all of us, we didn't take each other for granted. And it was just so beautiful. And I know that I'm a very hopeful and faithful person. But I'm wondering, from your perspective as a coach, as a yoga teacher, as a meditation guy, as a human being, what's your outlook for this world pause that we're taking? What do you hope comes out of this?
I love that question so much, and it's something I've contemplated a lot.
Yeah.
It's something for me. I read an article. I'm not sure if you read it or heard it, that there had been a hole in the ozone layer. Did you read about that?
I did, yeah.
And how it was in less than 3 months, the hole is closed. And there's great symbology here, Billy. And this is what I want the listeners to really take away, is in every life form, right? In all of our lives, there was a hole, right? There was a hole that needed to be closed, right? It's maybe the space between you and somebody else, right? People, maybe it's, the hole was an issue that you've just never dealt with. Maybe it was the deeper inner journey. Maybe for some people it was to start eating better, and now they're being forced to eat better because they have to cook all their food instead of eating out. Everybody had at least one hole in their, in their atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And so I believe this time has given everybody the opportunity to consider what that hole is for them, or what the holes are. And then, you see, now's not the time to sit back. Now's the time to take action. And you see, because if we don't, in my world of, coaching, right? I go, people say, well, I'm X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, yeah, but, like the economy is going to be horrible, the job market. And I go, you've got to think the opposite. You should be planning out your next 8 weeks. Like, specifically, what do you want? Mm-hmm. What do you want to learn? What's the skill you haven't been able to master because you're working so much, but now you've got some extra time?
Yeah.
What's that thing that will help you chill out? Remember that music you like to listen to all the time, but you get home and you're stressed out from work and you're barely to make it up to your bed and you fall asleep? You could listen to that classical music you love.
Mm-hmm.
So how we use this time can either be you could be so mindful about it, or you could use it in a way that feeds, right, the negativity, the worry, the angst, or we could use it to to make our world and the world a better place when all of this moves on.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Joe, I'm wondering personally, when we get back to that some sense of normalcy, which normal is a button on my washing machine, right? But when we enter back into the world and we're allowed to see each other and connect in a physical way, what's going to be different about Joe Gandarillas after all of this?
I think a lot. I think, like I said, like I've said, you and I've talked about before, I think this has been one of the hardest moments in my life. And I've had a few really tough ones, I'd say. And I think what will be different for me is to always remember my humanness, right? Is to remember that that our life is a constant process, and that even when we think we've kind of come to that edge, you're like, nope, there's another level, right? Like, so there's always more. And it's interesting because in my practice, I teach people, come on, there's always more. And I know I believe that in wholeheartedly. I've always feel like I've lived that. But this, I think, has pushed me to that, like what felt like my peak. And then I go, oh no, there's more. Mm-hmm. Like there's more to learn. There's more for me there's more room for me to grow. You see, because when I grow, then I can teach people more. You see, because I've learned a lot about myself during this time. Some people say, well, like in the beginning, I was like, I really miss my friends. I miss this human connection. I mean, Billy, I would see a lot of people every day, just between coaching, our design business, between, teaching, 5 yoga classes, 6 yoga classes a week, 1 meditation class a week. I have a big audience out there.
Yeah.
And it's very, very connected. So to go from the level of connection to now being in a house, my husband goes to his office every day, by myself most of the time, that was a huge shift for me. Mm-hmm. And I say, the world called me to shift. And now how am I going to shift when I'm done with this? Because I'll never be the same person. I'll tell you how I think the shift has happened. I think I took some things for granted before. Personally, I really do. I think I actually took a lot of things for granted. I think I'm a worker. I work hard. I work hard at everything that I do. But I didn't work hard enough at slowing down and just taking it all in. And I think that this time has taught me to, that I don't need to go and go and go all the time. Even though on some level, I like that. But I think what I realized is that I like the pause sometimes. I like that, what? I don't need, I'm going to sit in my backyard and just take it all in. Where before it would be like, run. I'd be like, oh, I'm too tired to go outside. I just want to eat my dinner and go to bed. Mm-hmm. And now I've, because I was always doing for others, it's kind of the work I do. It's very, outward. And although I have great inner practice, I realized that there's more and there's another level. And that the better I am at that next level, the better that I'll be for myself, for the people that I love, and for the people that I serve.
I love that, Joe. You know, I'm just thinking internally, one of the nicest things about talking to master teachers like yourself is each and every person that I look up to as mentors and colleagues and peers, all of them lead with this idea that they're going to be a student for life. And in the same way that you've said, you know, I want to walk the walk, and I want to do what I'm asking my clients to do, that just makes you and your practice and your witness and your example so much more real for myself and for everyone that is blessed enough to cross your path, Joe.
You know, Billy, I appreciate that, and I'll tell you, you know, I'm a sharer. You know, I share with my clients all the time. I had a client this morning, and I, you know, shared a story with her, and she was like, this is my favorite part of when we spend time, when I can hear that you have some of the same, like some of the same stuff. And I go, well, we all have stuff.
Yeah.
I go, my role is to help teach you how to be better at what happens when we, you know, get pushed to our edge, or when we get that rub, right? Let's come up with tools and strategies. Not, I don't want to talk about the problem. I want to talk about the solution to the problem. Yeah. And what we're going to do. So when I go back out there in the world, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to be hugging people right away until like we're ready to hug people. But I'll hug. Hell yeah. But you know what? If I have to take a step back and I say, like I love how you said that about your mom, right? You know, like you saw your mom and your brother, and there was this love connection. I'm like, I feel it right here.
Yeah, same.
So how do we cultivate those kind of things without having to go through, like, you know, because the world is not going to be the same. And if you think if people think they're going to go out there and it's going to be exactly the same, there's going to be a problem right now. Yeah. So we've got to shift. We've got to learn to take the shift, and we've got to move with it. Do we fight it, or do we actually, you know, do we meet it, and then do we learn all the tools to make it better?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the shift.
That's my hope, Joe. Out of all of this, that there's this dynamic shift, not only for us individually, but for us as a world, and kind of as you said earlier in our podcast interview, this idea of surrendering, right, and almost letting go of some of the false ideas that we carry around about who we are and who the world is.
Isn't that the truth, Billy? Right? You know, sometimes we have these grandiose ideas of the world, but you know, really, if we just slow down, it's not as complicated as we think it is.
And yet we want to make it more complicated than it is.
I mean, I think if there's anything, right, Billy, like what did this moment in time teach us? To slow down and to take it all in. I mean, I had one of my clients said that, I said, tell me something good. And she said, I have never seen this world so green. And she said, you know what? I bet it has been that green. I've just never taken the time to see it. And I said, isn't that the truth? Joe, I go, you know, we're being, it's the same with people. People who are going, wow, I've really never realized what beautiful brown eyes you've got. And you're like, yeah, because you never really looked.
Yeah, no, I love it. The author is escaping me, but there's this beautiful poem that ends with, you know, just look at the view. Just look at the view. You know, yeah. And what an opportune moment for us to really look at the view, take a look at ourselves, each other, and be honest.
You know, in that the truth, and you know, like one of the things we talked about, love, like just surrender to love, right? Like it's like, you know, one of my favorite poems is by E.E. Cummings, right? I carry your heart in my heart. Like, whose heart will you carry in your heart today? Like, it's so, like, you think of that thought, and I'm like, you know what, when I think of the fear, I go, I want to think of carrying somebody's heart in my heart. I want to drop your heart in mine, and I want to feel that love.
Joe, I really couldn't think of about a better place to end. You know, this idea that we all have this opportunity to not only carry our hearts of each other, but also to allow our hearts to be carried. What a beautiful sentiment and idea. And My hope is that we're learning how to do that, especially during this time where we're just slowing down and seeing each other maybe more for the truth of who we are, and jumping on this idea of being a part of something bigger and greater than just ourselves, which really in the end is each other. Joe, I can't thank you enough for being a part of Shift and being the teacher you are. Thank you so much for today, and I look forward to our next talk.
Billy, thank you so much. It's always a joy. I'll see you next time.
Total pleasure, man. Everyone, thanks so much. Shift with Joe Gandarillas. Thank you.